In South Sudan is a raging war between the Dinka and the Nuer. Now, if you know anything about South Sudan, you'll know that it's not the first time they've had a civil war. They did have a civil war between 2013 and 2018, where it was on ethnic lines between the Nuer and the Dinka. As a freshly young country, it had just acquired independence, it needed to be welded together. And the only way it could be welded together was through a power sharing accord between the Nuer and the Dinka, with their leaders, Riek Machar for the Nuer, assuming the post of vice president, whilst the leader of the Dinka, Salva Kiir, took the president's position. Everything was all until recently, where, as you know, South Sudan controls a lot of oil wells. These oil wells are in the south of the country, but they have pipelines running through the northern part of the country, which is North Sudan. Now, if you know anything about North Sudan, they have their own problems as well. They've just been having a war on its own. These pipelines were destroyed. When the pipelines were destroyed, South Sudan lost about 2/3 of all its revenue. You can only imagine having to run a country at a loss of 2/3 of your revenue. So obviously this made Salva Kiir a very insecure president who wasn't so certain of his position in power. And that has brought about all these conflicts and fizzles. Now, everything would have been ignored, but there's a raging conflagration brewing, and that's because many regional powers have decided to join. Most notably, Uganda. Uganda has chosen a side. Uganda has chosen to support Salva Kiir and the Dinka. Now, I've got friends from Southern Sudan. I've never really bothered to find out who's Nuer and who's Dinka. I've always seen them as the same to me. And my friends hate it when I talk about Uganda in a very bad way, but, they always throw very splenetic aspersions about how I'm not being a patriot and all these things. And it's not about really being patriotic or anything like that. It's just trying to be objective and showing all sides of the coin. The point here I'm trying to make is, has our involvement in the war in South Sudan brought about our own bankruptcy? Are we bankrupting Uganda and making it run broke itself because we're trying to support a country that's not really bringing in as much revenue as is expected? Obviously, you must understand that all these wars are never for nothing. You always go and support a side because you know you're going to get something out of it. ADF is part of a sophisticated network of IS. IS is Islamic State. They decentralize all this money through cryptocurrencies. They use the Congo as a base to get resources. They pick up all these resources. They fund so many operations all over the world. So going in there and fighting them, that I can understand. When it comes to South Sudan, we're not just giving it military aid. We go there because we know we need to collect on some of that oil. Right now, we're not collecting, but we're in the thick of things. So now, what happens? The Nuer are predominantly from the upper part of the country, Upper Nile, which is in the northern part of the country, in a town called Nasir. So there was a small conflict between the White Army, which belongs to the Nuer, who then attacked a helicopter in which a South Sudanese general was killed. And that has led all hell to break loose. Uganda has joined the melee. We've sent our fighter planes there. We've sent all our soldiers there, and we're fighting. We don't even know why we're fighting. Our parliament doesn't know why we're fighting. I don't even know why we've chosen a side. I don't know why we've chosen the Nuer or the Dinka. So to all you, my South Sudanese friends, when I find you, this has nothing to do with us. We don't know why we support which side. But in my own view, we have been running our own country on its own budgets. We had a budget projection of 54 trillion Uganda shillings, which by all intents and purposes comes to about $17 billion or something like that. Now, if anybody of you knows about financial modeling, you make a projection. A projection is a forecast is a forecast, but it has to have very well-grounded mathematical assumptions, and it has to fall very close to the final figure. Finance, when you're forecasting, you must use dead reckoning. You can be vaguely right, but should never be accurately wrong. You can be vaguely right, but should never be accurately wrong. That's not financial modeling. You cannot have a 30% gap of your previous forecast. It means that all your assumptions were totally wrong. We have come from 54 trillion to now 72 trillion Uganda shillings, which is almost a 30% increase. Now, there's nobody who can make forecasting like that. In finance, you cannot make that kind of forecasting. You cannot say that you made a budget assumption and now your new budget assumption has increased by 30%. It means everything that you made as a first preliminary assumption was totally off. It purely speaks into the fact that maybe we're actually running out of money to fund these wars, because we're in Congo, we're fighting. We have now moved to South Sudan, we're fighting. Who is funding all this money? And that's how you get all these supplementary budgets. Whilst we are fighting against Kawempe and Nalukola and trying to swear him in and all these things, imagine the Parliament of Uganda passed a supplementary of 4 trillion Uganda shillings in this period of time. I mean, where is this money coming from, and who is it going to do, and what is it going to do? I mean, I've heard about how some of it is going to help the buyout of Umeme. That's another story for another day, which is just ridiculous and absurd. I don't know how we sign a contract with Umeme, and when the contract comes to an end, we need to pay them. But that's the situation of things in Uganda. In my own view, a lot of this money, of course, fizzles down to corruption, and people want to fund very lavish lifestyles for politicians in Uganda, but their families are abroad, living a fantastic life. Some people, judges have house girls in their homes, and now they're being called out. All these things are happening. I hate to name names and talk about things in a very negative way, but this is what we're seeing tonight. Now, my fear is we are bankrupting the country. We're really bankrupting the country. Who is going to pay this money? Who is going to pay this money down the line when we're just borrowing on one tone? If it is not us, it's our children. And you see people come and defend, in a very, very arrogant, uninformed way, more and more spending, more and more borrowing, which is just wrong. Somebody needs to call this out, and somebody needs to put an end to it. Outright fraud and greed, and somebody needs to call it out. We cannot pay all this money, and we cannot borrow